Hello, today I'm going to be checking out the latest case from Montech. This is the HS02 and it's available from today in both black and white with an MSRP of $119.99 US. Or you can get the Pro version that I've got here, which comes with 5 ARGB PWM fans pre-installed for an extra $30. But is it worth your hard-earned money? Let's dive in and take a closer look. So before you can remove the side panels, you're going to have to remove the top panel. It's magnetically attached and there's a little tab at the back you can lift it up with. And we have no additional dust filters behind this. We've got tempered glass on the front and the side. They're not a single sheet of tempered glass. There is a gap between them with the curve on the front panel. Both our tempered glass panels can be pulled out from the top and lifted away. And we take a look at our other side panel, you notice we've got a perforated area. This is to provide a source of cooler for our power supply's intake fan. Take a look at our front I/O. We've got a power button. We've got a button to control the case's built-in ARGB controller. We've got separate headphone and microphone jacks. We've got 2 USB Type A ports and a single Type C port. Taking a look in from the front, the most obvious thing you're going to notice is the bump coming out from the top. This is where your power supply is going to be installed. The reason that Montech have done this, it means they're going to be able to limit the width of the case compared to a standard dual chamber case. And it also means you're not going to need a power supply compartment down at the bottom, so you can have the fans directly at the bottom of the case, providing lots of fresh air to your graphics card. The downside obviously is it doesn't look great when you look in from the front. Because I've got the Pro version of the case, it comes with 3 120mm ARGB PWM reverse blade fans at the bottom set to intake, and as well we've got 2 standard fans at the rear set to exhaust. And I think the fans look really clean being recessed at both the bottom and the rear. The only other place you can mount fans in this case is at the top, where it's up to 3 120mm fans or up to a 360mm radiator. And it is important to note there's no 140mm fan support. And you are going to have to screw your fans or radiators directly to the top because there's no removable bracket. You'll notice that your motherboard is going to be recessed, and because of this the maximum motherboard support is up to ATX. You can see we've got additional cutouts for back connector motherboards. And if you want to go with a CPU or cooler, the maximum height supported is up to 175mm. If you want to go with a micro ATX motherboard, there's a little cover at the bottom which is going to make it look much cleaner. And you are going to need to remove this if you want to go with an ATX motherboard. So taking a look at the top, you'll notice we've got this perforated panel for routing all your cables. We've got cutouts here for routing your fans and your AIO. And we've also got cutouts at the bottom which should keep all your cables in the recessed area. Likewise, there's little cutouts here coming straight through from the power supply compartment. Taking a look at the rear of the case, you can see we've got 7 horizontal PCI expansion slot brackets, and in terms of graphics card support, the maximum length supported is up to 420mm. Montech are keen that your graphics card is well supported, and they do include a GPU support bracket. If you want to mount your graphics card vertically, you'll be pleased to see it is possible to rotate the PCI expansion slot brackets round by 90 degrees. So the only thing extra you're going to need to mount your graphics card vertically is a riser cable. And we've got an ARGB lighting bar on the front and side of the case. Our case's one and only dust filter is at the bottom. Moving into the rear of the case, at the front we've got our power supply cover. On the back of it you are able to mount up to 2 2.5-inch drives or a single 3.5-inch plus a 2.5-inch drive. Your power supply is going to be hanging down from the top on a removable bracket. And the case is compatible with full-sized ATX power supplies up to a maximum length of 200mm. If you'd rather go with an SFX power supply, the bracket is rotatable, allowing you to install one of these as well. Because the power supply is going to be mounted at the front, there is an extension cable included which runs to the back of the case. Just take care to match the colour of the power supply with the case that you're using, because when we look in from the front, the power supply compartment is perforated, so you are going to be able to see your power supply through the perforations. There's another drive bracket behind our motherboard where you're able to mount 2 2.5-inch drives or a single 3.5-inch drive. There's a cable cover bracket at the top, and with it removed you can see that we've got a 6-port PWM and ARGB hub. With it you're going to have motherboard control. You just need to plug the PWM and ARGB cable into your motherboard and make sure to plug the SATA cable into your power supply to power the hub. So it's good to see that Montech have matched the case cables to the colour of the case, but for some reason they've forgotten about the PWM and ARGB hub, and the cables coming from it are black in this white case. It also is possible to invert the case. The feet and dust filters from the bottom can be moved to the top. The top panel can be moved to the bottom, and then all you simply need to do is replace the other panels. So what I want to do now is give you a closer look at the build I've put together in the case. Taking a look at our temperatures, our Ryzen 7 9700X idled at 40 degrees and reached a maximum of 63 degrees during a 10-minute IDA64 stability test. The AORUS Master 5080 Ice idled at 27 degrees and reached a maximum of 57 degrees under load. In terms of noise, we had average noise levels of 39 decibels at idle and 42 decibels under load. So moving on to my experience of building in the case, and it was great to have all 5 of the case fans pre-installed and connected up to the fan and ARGB hub. That made things really simple, and the fact that I went with the back connector motherboard, plugging in all the cables directly into the back, was really straightforward as well, and cable management was really good with those panels helping hide all the cables. I did run into a few issues during the build. I was planning on installing the graphics card vertically, but when I looked at the back, because the rear fans are recessed, there was no way to secure the graphics card to the bracket with the bracket already in the case. So I thought, no problem, I'll secure the bracket to the graphics card first of all, and then pass the whole thing into the case and secure it up. The problem with this was because the graphics card was so big, it wouldn't fit through the gap. It was only when I was sitting down to edit the video that I realized that the rear fan bracket could be removed. There's 2 screws at the top, and then this is going to allow you to move it out of the way, allowing you to access the screws on the vertically mounted PCIe slot brackets. But I thought, no problem, I'll just go horizontal, but the problems didn't end here. I really struggled to get this graphics card to fit into the case, and the only way I could actually get it to install was actually to stretch the case out, and I had the fingers on the graphics card pushing up against the motherboard when there was a risk of it actually scratching the motherboard. So the problems with installing the graphics card didn't end there. I had some issues using the GPU support bracket. So initially I thought it should go in the second slot from the bottom, but whenever I raised it up, it wasn't actually providing any support for the graphics card. Moving it up 1 slot and installing it in the lowest position down, I found it quite difficult to install, but also in that position it was actually pushing the graphics card up at the right end. So there was no way to just support the graphics card. In one position it was too low, and in the other position it was too high. And although the bracket was adjustable in each of the positions, there wasn't really any overlap. And the final issue I had with installing the graphics card was actually routing the 12V 2x6 cable through to it. Once I installed the bottom heatsink on the motherboard and the graphics card, I wasn't able to bring the 12V 2x6 cable out the bottom cutout, although I was able to bring it out the top and route it over the top of the graphics card. So I ended up having to uninstall the graphics card, uninstall that GPU support bracket, which was an absolute pain to install in the first place, bring the graphics card out again, where there was risk of me scratching my motherboard for a second time, and then be able to remove that bottom heatsink on the motherboard and bring the cable through. So if you do want your GPU power cables coming out the bottom, I would recommend passing them through at an early stage as soon as you installed your power supply. The other side issue I had was installing the radiator at the top. Because there is only 120mm support, the space at the top is actually quite narrow. The area that I used, the fan connectors, were at the back, and unless I was going to have them hanging down in the main body of the case, they had to be installed directly behind the radiator. There wasn't a lot of space for this, and it did mean installing the screws at the top was quite difficult because they were putting quite a bit of pressure on those connectors up against the back of the case. So moving on to things I liked about the case, particularly with this Pro version of the case, I really like the fact that for an extra $30 you're getting 5 good PWM ARGB fans pre-installed. They look great in their recessed position, particularly with the ARGB lighting bar on the side and on the front as well. So moving on to the things I didn't like about the case, and unfortunately I've got a rather long list for you here. I'm going to start off with the aesthetics looking in from the front of the case, and I think they are ruined by the big bump of the power supply. I can see why Montech have done it. They want to get the fans right at the bottom, and if we take the power supply compartment away, they have to move the power supply somewhere else. In other cases, they will have it up at the top and at the back. They've decided to move it to the front, and by having it bulge into the main compartment, they can keep the case nice and narrow, avoiding the main problem with dual chamber cases, which are really wide and take up a big footprint on your desk. So I do think this case design would work really well if we had a mesh front panel, but for a case with tempered glass on the front, I don't think this was a great idea. Some of the other design choices that I don't think work particularly well are the perforated panels at the front over the power supply, so meaning that you're going to have to match the power supply color to the color of the case. and also you're going to have to be really careful. I've got a white power supply that had a plain back, but on the back of a lot of power supplies you're going to have a label with some writing on it, and when you look through the perforations you are going to be able to see this. Looking down at the bottom below your power supply from the front, you've got a solid white panel, and I think this would have looked so much better extended up to the top, and I also think it would look so much better over the cable covers over the motherboard, because who really wants to look in from the front and see the back of your power supply and cables being routed at the back. I did think the curved tempered glass panel worked well between the front and the side without a pillar in the middle, but a lot of cases now are starting to do this with a single piece of tempered glass. In this case uses two separate pieces, meaning you can see the gap between the two panels. I also found it really disappointing that Montech had decided to use a black fan and ARGB hub with black cables that needed to be plugged into the motherboard. I got away with this because I had used a back connector motherboard, but it would have been an awful shame given that they'd colour matched all the other case cables to have to bring black cables and plug them into the front of your motherboard. In terms of cable management at the back, although I had a pretty easy time with cable management, and although Montech did include plenty of Velcro cable straps and cable ties, it was a bit of a shame there wasn't a central cable raceway with pre-routed Velcro cable straps, because that would have made things so much simpler. And then we come on to the issues with fitting hardware in the case. Because the fans and radiator at the top are sitting pretty much flush to the back, there's no space behind for any connectors, and this particular I/O didn't work particularly well. If you've got a fancy I/O with magnetic connectors and your single set of cables coming out from the end, you'll not run into any problems. Or if you've got longer connectors on your fans, you can route them through to the back and then have all the connectors at the back and only cable behind it. But because these fans daisy chained to each other, the connectors were quite short, they needed to sit behind the radiator, and this made installing this radiator quite difficult. And then we come on to the issues I had with the GPU. Horizontally, an absolute nightmare installing this graphics card, and again that may be due to the combination of GPU and motherboard I've used. But you think this should really be tested with large modern hardware, and you should not have to worry about damaging your very expensive graphics card trying to install it in the case, and really there should be a little bit more tolerance to allow your graphics card to be installed. The GPU support bracket was equally disappointing. Because you got fans at the bottom, you're not able to use the one that comes with the motherboard, and although the bracket is adjustable at each height, there's no overlap between the two heights. So in one position it was too low, in the position above it was too high, and I just couldn't get it to support this graphics card in a completely straight position. The final thing I didn't like about this case was how simple it was to invert. Many of you will be saying that's great. Normally inverting a case can take you 15-20 minutes because it's really complicated, you're having to reroute so much. But the reason that you do this is you can actually use that case on the other side of your desk, but you have normal functionality for moving out the panels. So you will still unclip your tempered glass panels from the top, lever them out and lift them up. In this case, what you were doing was clipping them in from the top, swinging them down, and then clipping them and securing them at the bottom, which is a recipe for disaster. You're going to pull this out, the panel's then going to fall down and smash on your desk at some point. Definitely convenient for the build, but I would rather spend an extra 10 or 15 minutes, convert the case properly, and then have normal panels that clipped out from the top. So while the feet are secured with screws in the standard position, in the inverted position they're just held on magnetically, so when you're moving the case they do tend to fall off. So we're now reached the stage in the review where I to tell you should you go out and pick up this case, and I think you're probably guessing where this is going. I've had a lot of issues in terms of hardware compatibility, not the best building experience, and there's a lot of the design features in this case which I do not like, so this is definitely not a case for me. Although we are all different and a lot of these features may well appeal to somebody else. So if you do want to go ahead and do a build in this case, you'll find a link to a full step-by-step PC build guide in the description. So hopefully you have enjoyed this case review. If you have, please remember to give it a thumbs up. And if you're not currently subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button as well.